for the death penalty. I've just argued that it can be extremely effective in the right conditions. That's my whole. If you guys would ever just absorb my opening statement, my opening statement was,
understand, Rachel.
The death
we're not
penalty
saying
absolutely can be a deterrent.
The problem is
Rachel Wilson is back, and this time she is teaming up with Marte Reyes to take on the soy pill and the radical coder. The mega powers of the libtards right here, soy pill and radical coder. But this time, they're debating on if the death penalty is a deterrent for crime. Keep in mind, that's the prompt. The death penalty is a deterrent for crime. All right? Now, Rachel Wilson and Marte are going to be arguing that, yes, it is a deterrent for crime. And soy pill and radical coder have to argue that, no, it is not a deterrent for crime. Keep that prompt in mind, because it's very important for this debate. Let's see how this debate goes down on the Raging Tomatoes channel.
All right, well, let's dig into some of this. So Ryan did exactly what I told Marte when we were chatting earlier that I thought he would do. I could have practically said his opening for him. I know you, Ryan. The problem
well, you know that I was going to research it, right?
Well, I knew you were going to do surface level research on the United States only, and that's why my opening was tailored to kind of respond to what I knew you were going to say, which is like, sure, in the United States, where we have 50 different states that all have different laws and have, you can have a state like Michigan, like Marte was referencing, where terrible high rates of violent crime and homicide, but only in one city, and the entire rest of the state is nothing like that one city, right? So the United States is a pretty complex, huge place. So we have to look at more data. We have to look at longer sets of data. We have to look at extenuating circumstances and the conditions under which the death penalty is being implemented. So why do we see that when we look at the lowest rates of crime around the world, some of the top countries that have the lowest crime, the big ones? Now you can look at like Luxembourg or, these tiny countries that have like 400 people in them. They're going to be the lowest crime rates overall. You'd probably statistically want to take those and throw them out because they're an anomaly. But if you look at like the next two biggest countries that have the lowest rates of murder and violent crime, it would be Singapore and Japan, which both have the death penalty. Then you look at a place like the Philippines, which is highly corrupt, very, very poor, and the death penalty there, not as effective. Why? Because there's so much corruption, because the police there are so corrupt that oftentimes they're the ones dealing the drugs and like helping the murderers and things. So under a system like that, or a system like the United States, yeah, you're probably going to have a hard time proving that the death penalty does much in the way of deterrence. But in a system that's a little swifter, where there's higher trust and there's more integrity in the system itself, people get arrested more quickly, they get convicted at a higher rate. It seems to work great. So I don't know that you just saying the United States isn't a good case, or it doesn't seem to work here under the current conditions, is an argument for whether or not the death penalty is effective overall.
That's a good point, Rachel. Can I read you something from Amnesty International here? This is called Singapore, the Death Penalty, a Hidden Toll of Executions. I don't know if you came across this. It says, despite the use of the death penalty and high execution rates, drug addiction continues to be a problem, particularly among the poorly educated, impoverished, unemployed, and young people from broken homes. According to the website of the Singapore Central Narcotics Bureau, a total of 3,393 drug abusers were arrested in 2002. The number of new drug abusers increased by 16% compared to figures for 2001. The CNB announced that they had seized X amount of kilograms of heroin, X amount of kilograms of cannabis during 2002, and reported a significant increase in the use of methamphetamine. This is despite the fact that the scope of the death penalty was increased in 1998 to introduce a mandatory death sentence for importing, exporting, or trafficking in more than 250 grams of the drug. So it seems, especially in cases where addiction is a problem, people who already think they're going to die from it, it's not deterring them insofar as, let's be clear. If we wanted to say that every crime was punishable by death, it would be very hard pressed for me or Ryan to admit, of course, people are going to maybe hesitate now about stealing a candy bar from 7-Eleven if they think they're going to die as a result of that. But if we look at what actually happens when you practically implement this, especially in the country that you use as an example, this just doesn't seem to be working to the degree that we want. And when it is working, when it's like, hey, we have fewer crime overall, we can look at the crime rate. Well, guess what? We also kill a bunch of innocent people to get that result. And I guess my question to you would be, one, how many innocent people need to die before you're okay with the crime rate being that low? But two, also, what do you have to say about the fact that the drug rate is just going up regardless? Because addiction is a sickness that people get, pulled into. It's not like they don't want to quit, but they do it anyway, knowing that they might die as a result.
It's interesting that he says innocent people have to die. Well, no, the reason they're being sentenced to death is because they committed a crime. They're not innocent people. So my question would be to the soy pill, well, what's your definition of an innocent person? Because they're not just picking people randomly off the street and then sentencing them to death. They're sentencing them to death because they committed a crime. So is your definition of an innocent person like someone that just commits a minor crime? So the chocolate bar example, the Snickers bar, was that an innocent person? Because you could listen, I agree with you that I don't think if you steal a Snickers bar, you should be punished by death. But if it's deemed a crime, it's a crime. It's not an innocent person. When I think innocent person, I think someone that didn't do anything wrong.
Well, I'd have a lot to say to all of that. So you saying that drug use is going up doesn't necessarily tell me much. Again, we need more context than that. We need to know, like, are the drug use rates there higher than other places? Are they lower than other places? They might still be really, really low, even though they're going up, right? So,
but and I'm conceding, Rachel. Obviously, I think drug use in general, if you touch a gram of weed, I will kill you. Some people would otherwise, who are not going to do it, are going to not do it. So that's why Sarah, I actually do have a kind of an issue with the prompt of, is it a deterrent for crime, period? Yeah, I think if you death penalty every single crime, of course, it's like impossible to argue against because people don't want to die, right? Well, the question is this effective? And is this...
Well, then debate over. Debate over. Soy pills conceded. Game over. All right. See you later, everybody. Oh, wait, there's a lot of debate left.
It's not going to be effective.
I don't love the prompt either, to be fair. And it's not, if I had like my druthers, I would have changed it a little bit. I would have tweaked it a little bit to make it easier for both sides to really get into this. But I mean, no system is going to be perfect. Every system is going to have wrongful convictions. And you could say, well, then, and I used to argue this when I was a young, goofy libertarian. I'd say, well, if one innocent person is being killed, I don't trust the state, blah, blah, blah. However, as I've gotten older and wiser, it's like, okay, there's going to be some people who are going to be wrongfully convicted in any system. And I don't know that like locking someone up for the rest of their life in prison is necessarily better. They're both quite terrible. It's a bad situation either way. And I wouldn't be, and I'm not, just to be clear, advocating that we should just be killing people for a gram of weed. I think it should be like only the most heinous and most violent crimes where we just can't risk this person, like Kenneth McDuff, who was a serial killer in the 70s, somehow got paroled and got out and continued his killing spree. Ted Bundy escaped, right, and continued to kill people. Like, there's some people that we just can't take the risk. And like Marte said in his opening, continue to kill and injure people and cause problems even when they're in prison. So like the whole idea
can I address your point? The idea of like which one is worse?
Sure.
I mean, if you're not dead, you have the opportunity to appeal your case and potentially prove you're innocent, and death is forever. I mean, unless you believe in an afterlife, but like then that's the whole reason why, hey, it's better for us to lock them up long term, because maybe if they are innocent, they will actually eventually get exonerated. But if they're dead, they can never do that.
I'm going to ask you a question. So
this before you do, do you mind if I respond to one other thing that was said?
Ryan
a couple of quick things. So I know Rachel says, in her younger years, she thought maybe, one innocent death might be, too much, and now she's grown older and wiser. I might be a little sympathetic to that. The idea that only one innocent death might be at times worth. There are casualties in war, right? But we're not talking about one innocent death. We're talking about a rate of about 12%. We're talking about 1 in 8 exonerations. And second of all, to defend the prompt itself, I think even in the case and I'm maybe pushing on Soy a little bit here, but even in the countries where we do see the death penalty being used swiftly and capital punishment being used for maybe much lower level crimes, it's not necessarily you still have to demonstrate that it's the death penalty itself and not just a harsh action on crime that's actually deterring crime. Because if you're telling someone that you're going to kill them for a gram of weed, or you're going to lock them in jail for the rest of their life for a gram of weed. I think both of those are likely to deter crime. So
I got a question for you now.
Sorry, I'm finishing. I'm waiting to plan, I promise. Yeah. The burden is, of course, on you guys to demonstrate that it is the death penalty specifically, even in those cases, that is the thing that's deterring crime.
I hear you. So I have a question. I need you to go ahead and reconcile this. Soy Pill went ahead and made this statement in his opening statement. So can you prove that an innocent person was ever put to death?
I think so, yeah. You can show that there's evidence that comes out post-death where like they would have otherwise exonerated them and they get fried. Yeah.
Right.
I named some of them. Yeah, Cameron Todd Willingham, Carlos de Luna, Troy Davis. These are all people who were exonerated post.
There's some in this amnesty page the drug crimes too. Yeah.
Well, that leads me to my next point as far as deterrence, right? This is why we're here on this topic. So if we go ahead and take the death penalty out of one of the things that happens inevitably out of capital punishment is death penalty. We can all agree on that. So a lot of people, they'll argue and say, well, the death penalty is used as a deterrent to argue against release. When somebody is going to be put to death, somebody may say he narrowly avoided the death penalty, right? Giving a deterrent to possible release. If we then take the death penalty away, that's just one more roadblock taken away between a proven killer at times and release to the public. If you take away the death penalty, what will you replace this with?
Life in prison without parole.
Great. So now you're contending with a whole nother can of worms. They're more apt to kill people in prison and staff and everybody else. And then you have release.
Right. So, well, hold on. They're not getting released. If they're on trial, if they would otherwise be on death row, almost definitely they would be in life in prison without parole. Now, if you want to talk about the dangerous prisons and the conditions that create and the fact that we like fuck with our inmates and say, hey, here's the yard and we're not going to do all these checks and we don't really care if you kill each other. Yeah, I think this is fucked up. And I don't think that we need the death penalty. Hold on. Well, let me finish. I don't think we need the death penalty to fix the conditions that would otherwise fuck with the people inside, the inmates, the guards and all that. I think there's ways to reform that don't involve just killing people that are killers. Again, this is we're going to keep going back and forth on, well, you have to contend with the fact that it is more costly to kill them, that if you don't want to go through this like process of appeals and have them have their own lawyers, which they're the least likely to have their own lawyers, so the state has to pay for that. It's cost us more money. How do you contend with that? Like whether
you're talking about mitigating cost, right? In prison.
That's part of it. Yeah. But also the fact that I think we can reform prison without getting rid of the death penalty.
We'll meet on that regard as far as mitigating costs, right? We could talk about costs all day, right? Funerals cost money, right? Yep. Having to go ahead and increase security, protect from people that will kill inside cost money because you have to rehire new staff if they die, all these other things. Now you have liabilities increasing too. So there's also costs on that end too. Yep. So you're going to
the costs are more on the death penalty one.
Yep. What's that?
But like you can analyze these costs if you break it down and see which costs more. It costs more to go through the arduous appeals process to make sure the people that deserve death than it does to just keep them alive forever in prison.
So that
do you think we should reduce that appeals process?
That promotes my argument as expediting the death penalty. I think that I can agree.
Right, that is the logical answer, Marte, which is we should get rid of some of these processes. Which that is a completely logical argument. Do that. However, then you have to contend with the fact that you're going to be killing more innocent people who do not get as much process to prove their innocence, right?
And the rate is already 12.5%.
It still doesn't answer my question with what to replace it with, because you have to replace it with something. I don't think that we can just go ahead and wipe it off the map and just say life in prison all across the board. If you've had somebody matter of fact, I'll go ahead and give you an example. So we can all say that home invasions happen all the time, right? Things happen. We have castle doctrine. You have to protect your life. We have stand your ground in Florida happens, right? Yep. So I need you to go ahead and follow this trail of logic. If I stand my ground and protect loved ones, or if somebody is in my home and I walk in and they're raping a minor, things like this can happen. What would you do? Would you say that this is a form of death penalty in immediacy, right? Because what happens is that, would you also agree that the court hands us this right through legislation, through the judicial system, gives us this, voters go ahead and permit this happening through votes. So that way this can become a law, so we can go ahead and immediately enact a death penalty at home.
Yeah, no, we see where you're going. Marte, the difference is if you kill someone in the process of committing a crime, you are stopping them from committing a crime. Once they're in jail, they're not raping your daughter anymore. So you aren't stopping them by killing them. All you're doing is potentially preventing them from being reintegrated into society or just removing them from life completely. And the question is that worth it? Not saying they don't deserve it, by the way. Is that worth it? First of all, it's not worth the cost. It's not worth the fact that we're, potentially killing 1 in 8 people every time we do this. And it's just like not clearly working, as the crime rates aren't going lower because of it. But you're right. Yes. Killing someone in the moment to stop them from committing a crime, I'm all for that. Someone breaks in your house, you don't know why they're there, you want to blow them away, 100%. But that's not the death penalty. That is stopping the crime in. So
my question is, how is it not the death penalty when we, by extension, by proxy, are given this right through rule of law that's been voted down to our homes that we can go ahead and enact by ourselves, right? How is this any different from a jury that day deliberating? And I'll give you an example of this.
Wait, can I answer right there? You don't have to give the example. I think, let me give an example of why it wouldn't be, right? Let's say someone broke into your home and you don't know why they're there and you blew them away. That's completely legal, right? Because it's like, this person could be trying to hurt me, whatever, right? But the reason it's not the death penalty is because let's say they did that and they stole your TV or whatever, or even, hey, let's say they like rape your daughter, right? And then they're running out of the building and they're a block away and you snipe them. That's not legal. You can't actually do that. And that would be punishing them for that.
That's not actually my hypothetical or anything.
No, that's my hypothetical. What I'm telling you is you would be killing them for the crime they committed. And I might think they deserve death. You're assuming that that's what the situation. I'm talking about a situation where I'm giving a hypothetical. I'm not assuming anything.
Right. Okay, great. What I'm saying is, though, we can have a jury in our own home, and that jury could be a wife deliberating with me. And I'm just saying, like, let's say, no pun intended, I have a soy husband here in this one corner, and then I have a wife, right? They're deliberating, and this guy, of course,
a soy husband and a radical wife, huh?
don't want to be with this husband anyways that says, I don't know, babe, what do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? Should we kill him? I think it was a crowbar in his hand. I don't know. What do you think? And they deliberate. This guy's a total pussy, right? He and his wife are interchangeable widgets. They have both say, they don't know what to do. That can be that's the form of a jury that happens in America almost every day to some degree, right? We can all say this. There's no difference between this happening on a jury and a jury happening with people deliberating behind closed doors. Now, this is
there's a big difference, actually. I think there's a pretty major difference in that one is part of a legal structure and one is like in an immediate moment of high energy and high.
I'm going to tie this in real quick. Somebody breaks into the house and they tell you, I'm gonna fucking kill you. They're running towards you with a knife and they have clear intention, and you go ahead and blow them away in the chest. This is plain as day. Your wife is also like the jury in the home, which I've portrayed in this household. She's able to give a testimony, maybe not proof, but evidence, right, of a testimony that's submitted in court. Same thing as a jury. How is that? I need you to tell me what the difference is other than just time.
You're stopping the crime versus the person's not doing the crime anymore, right? It's not the reason that we say that you can blow some away is not because we necessarily say that someone breaking into your house deserves death, because sometimes they don't, right? I don't think necessarily like, look, I want to kill someone who comes in and tries to steal my Xbox, but I don't, if you ask me just in a hypothetical, if someone stole an Xbox,
crime?
Wait, hold on, let me finish, please. It's like, I don't think that stealing an Xbox is punishable, should be punishable by death. However, if someone broke into my house to do that and I don't know what they're doing and I blew them away, I think they deserve death for putting me in a situation where I'm at fear for my life and my family, right? But once we know why they're there, once we have that evidence, and once they are not a risk to society because they're in custody, we can't just kill them right away. We have to say, okay, what did you do? Did what you do deserve death? And then we can go on to the death penalty. But that's the difference here, is their immediate moment of you stopping a potential harm to yourself or your family, or a situation where we now are not at harm and we have to decide what to do with this person based on their crime.
I'm not hearing the difference. And here's why I'm not hearing the difference.
This isn't exactly a rebuttal to Soy Pill, exactly, because I understand what he's saying. The thing, though, is about the example of, well, someone, tries to steal my Xbox or whatever. Like, of course, hypothetically, I don't think he deserves to lose his life. But you're putting me in a situation where I might fear for my life and have to take action. I mean, we never put it on the criminal, though, the person breaking into the house. Like they're, like, risking their life as well. Like, they have to know on some level they're risking a lot their life. Either the homeowner could be there with a firearm and can completely blow them away. Or even if they don't, even if they just get like caught by police, there's a warrant out for the arrest and then they eventually get caught by police and there's a bunch of cumulative crimes, charges that get built up. And so they serve, some time in jail. That's also them risking their life. But I feel like we don't put enough on the criminal and their actions, It's always like, well, do you think you should take their life for this? Sonny, can you go over there? It's always like, should we take the criminal's life for this? When it's like, when is it ever like criminal? Like, do you think you should be risking your life for this?
Because I think that deliberation happens, like we could just say spur of the moment, right? Deliberation happens spur of the moment behind courtrooms anyways. Have you ever seen 12 Angry Men? This film could have been like 2 minutes long if they came to a verdict. So it's like all we're talking about is semantics and time.
Well, the point of that movie was that they should deliberate to make sure that kid was innocent and not just choose something and kill him.
Just like a wife coming to me and says, what should we do? Because I think it was a crowbar. No, I don't think it wasn't. Deliberation happens. Let's say this guy takes a while to get in the home. He has to get through 13 locks. Whatever, so that's the thing though. Deliberation happens on one end, deliberation happens on the other, i.e. death penalty. So if we look at it from one end of the spectrum and the other end of the spectrum, you can say, yes, it's a delayed reaction, but how is it any different when the court says, death? We assume death, right? Then your wife and you coming to agreement saying we assume death at that moment too.
Marte, you proved your own point. You countered your own point, which is in the spur of the moment, we don't have 12 angry men deliberating whether or not this person is innocent breaking into our house. We have no idea whether they're there.
One angry wife can equal 12 angry men?
No, this is exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying we have no idea whether they're there, and that's why we are allowed to kill them and why I think it should be okay when someone is in your house and putting you at danger. Yeah, blow them the fuck away. But once we know that they're not a danger and we can deliberate behind closed doors and say, all right, let's figure out what this person did. Maybe they weren't trying to kill me. Maybe they were just trying to steal my Xbox. We can't just immediately decide, oh, well, let's kill them in this like short, spur of the moment thing, because that is what our court process is figuring out what this person did and what they deserve. That's why it's completely different.
So breaking entry is always spur of the moment. Sometimes
a whole bunch of stuff. I've been very quiet.
Yeah, go ahead and let Ryan add in to respond to what you said.
I think the fundamental difference is that we're talking about like due process, the thing that happens after the fact. And if you are the person who defended yourself in your home, then you are also going to want due process. You're going to want to ensure that you are legally established to have done the right thing in that scenario. We don't want, and if you are someone who maybe like invited someone into your home and then shot them in cold blood, we want to find that out, right? We want to, and again, this is going to be going through due process. So in the big difference is, we're talking about due process. We're not talking about the moment of immediacy, and we don't have to talk about like abolishing the castle doctrine or self-defense laws. We're not making that case at all. What you have to show is that this is actually deterring crime. It has nothing to do with us defending castle doctrine, which again, both of us clearly believe in. So it's kind of a non sequitur.
On your end. So on your end, the problem with that you're going to have to contend with is the problematic point of why the capital punishment is ineffective in America. And Rachel's right as far as other countries. This proves, so you would never argue like a minority can make rules for majority. That's basically what her argument is. So if we go down to what we're talking about, I think that what you're arguing for is a more lengthier process, more money spent through this judicial system to go ahead and finding out people delaying things and saying, all right, I'm going to go ahead and put it off till later, countless injunctions happening in court, things like this. And I agree that everybody should have due process, but there's a microcosm of due process that happens when a husband is arguing with his wife and deliberating too, as well. I think that there's a form of this if we look at it. And of course, I'm going to be pedantic here. We're in the middle of a debate. So all I'm saying though is due process is a matter of speculation and how you see things. Now we talk about, there's judicial due process where there's like paperwork, things like this, but absent this, there's no difference. You could say, well, this happened 20 minutes ago where this happened now. That's the only difference.
Marte, here's the difference. Let's say I invited you to dinner at my house and me and my wife were like, hey, let's fucking kill this guy. And we just blow you the fuck away. And then I say, hey, he had a gun. All right. And like that due process is very different from a bunch of investigators coming in, people making their case for and against, investigating whether or not you had a gun and going through the entire process to figure out, hey, is this guy just a fucking murderer who killed this guy in cold blood? Or did Marte actually run at him with a gun and try to kill him? Like, I think that's kind of scary that you're not really seeing how effective due process in the judicial system keeps innocent people from going to jail.
Do you not think
when
that happens in a microcosm of houses when there's a break-in happening?
Does, but I would much rather my jury be a judge and, you know, people and like a legal process than two people deciding, you know, in their fucking spur of the moment in their bedroom.
Yeah, they're now. But they're not the same.
And I do have a question for you, Marte. I mean, you say like, okay, if we get rid of the death penalty, there isn't a deterrent. But what about the fact that, like you said, these violent criminals now who aren't dead are going to be stabbing people in prison? Is that not a deterrent for other people to not go to jail so they won't get stabbed by the people that didn't get killed on death row?
Well, the thing is, you're trying to eliminate the death penalty in this argument by saying it's ineffective. We'll go ahead and wipe it off the map. I'm not saying that that's the absolute claim that you're making, but what I'm saying is that should decide your arguing, right? So you have to go ahead and replace it with some functional equivalent or something that's a deterrent, because you've heard of people in cases where they said, well, he narrowly avoided death, right? Well, it's a good thing that was there, because what are the steps to release? That's one step towards release from us letting them.
Could you elaborate? Are these people that were on death row and then get released out of prison? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, this is anybody that's in there for just, you know, murder, right? This is all across the board. What you're doing is you're eliminating a roadblock towards release. And I'm against that. That's another deterrent too, because people can also use that for cases and they'll say, well, you know what? We want him to spend the rest of his life in prison, but thankfully we have the death penalty to say, at least you got this, right? Absent any of this, now we have parole. Now you have pedos that are out there doing things, and you could make an argument for like rehabilitation, but show me the cases where those guys get rehabilitated. Because I did bring up the case where somebody is raping a minor in your house, right? If something like this is happening, you would agree with me that you'd stop them at the moment. This would be like, you know, full life termination, right? In order to stop that, because another life is scarred.
That's the key point right there, Marte, is I just kill them to stop it. And by the way, if this was my kid, obviously I'd want the death penalty just emotionally, right? But the question is that as what we have as a society determined should be having? Well, I don't know about logically whether or not like how this plays out if we start killing all these people. Like if we just kill, you know, this is a completely different argument. Like if we put the death penalty on specific crimes, like which ones are going to be deterred by making the death penalty, and how many innocent people are we locking up? Because I can say again, this goes back to
you're going to go ahead and do this. That's it. That's your only argument, is that it's emotional at this
the difference between this is
that's actually a good point. Like sometimes jury can be emotional. Like they do try their best to mitigate that by trying to keep them away from outside how do you say, like from the outside world, I guess, by not allowing them to consume social media, consumed outside media, because they don't want that to influence their opinion on this. But with that said, though, that still doesn't completely eliminate any sort of bias or emotional investment that jury members might have.
I saw a video of a guy stealing my bike, and I wanted to mutilate this man with my hands, right? But I don't think the punishment for like stealing a bike should be murder, because I don't think a society where we just kill everyone for committing even the slightest of crimes, because stealing a bike, it's bad, but it's not as bad as murdering.
Hold on, you're saying now it's not emotional.
No, I'm saying I'm emotional insofar as you're
arguing for it not being emotionally led.
Yeah, I'm arguing that our legal system shouldn't be based on how I feel when someone commits a crime against me, especially if it's just like stealing. Even though I want to kill them, I don't think we should kill people who steal just because they stole. I think a society is better because those people do sometimes, are able to be rehabilitated.
I mean, that's a little extreme. Like if I saw someone stealing my bike, yeah, of course I'd be pissed off, but I would be like, oh, I want to report this person and get this person some kind of penalty. My immediate reaction wouldn't be just, I want to kill him. So I don't know. It seems like Soy Pill might be a little bit more emotional than a lot of other people. But with that said, though, they keep going back and forth and like conflating the death penalty with wanting to just kill everybody for anything. Like, okay, if you steal a Snickers bar, oh, death penalty. If you unalive someone, oh, death penalty. No one's making that argument. The argument is if it's a deterrent, not if we should have the death penalty for all crimes.
Now, that's why I say if you've got like a Ted Bundy or some of these examples you bring up where it's like, yeah, this is like a serial rapist, I understand and think that probably these people should die and deserve death. The question is it practical and does it deter crime? Like, and this is something we haven't contended with at all, which is if you look right now, the death penalty is very rare in America, and yet the violent crime rate has been steadily declining for a very long time. And so it seems like without the death penalty, we're going in a very good direction. Why do we need it then? Is there some like counter positive you can show where like, obviously this is what has proved that it works in America, when in the counties that we do implement it, there's higher rates of violent crime?
All right, so I'm gonna contend with this point, but I'm gonna go ahead and move it on to something else, because I can concede that America, we can look at your stats and numbers and things like this. So Ryan, I do want to
these stats.
I want to. What's that?
I'm happy to jump back in too. Sorry, I had to take a very urgent phone call, but let me just interject one thing. Do you guys remember how bad crime was in New York in the 70s and early 80s? And then Rudy Giuliani got elected. And at that time, New York did have the death penalty. And Giuliani was super tough on crime. He basically got rid of the mob and lowered violent crime in New York, like the likes of which we haven't seen in this country in a long time. So we are bound to the prompt, which is, does the death penalty deter crime? And I would say historically, there's lots of cases where you can say yes. Another one would be post Revolution France.
Wait,
was tons
Rachel,
of chaos.
I don't want to interrupt.
Yeah, let's stay on that one.
What years was he mayor? Was it 1994 to 2001? Okay, thank you. So go ahead.
Also,
sorry, I didn't mean to.
Do you have evidence that it was specifically the death penalty that was deterring crime, or were there other factors that played into the mix? I'm sure there's writing about this, right?
As I said in my opening, there's always going to be other factors. You can't separate the death penalty from the other factors, and that's why I framed it as it does depend on the situation. So if it's in a situation like New York under Rudy Giuliani, where everybody kind of knew there's swift justice and it's going to come down hard, and they're very serious, right? He had a very tough on crime attitude. He had a very public campaign that he was going to clean up the streets. He's going to get rid of the mob. He's going to get rid of these violent criminals. And there's a death penalty there, and people see that, yes, you're going to get arrested. You're going to go straight to trial. You're probably going to get convicted. Yes, it's very effective in those cases. So another one,
Rachel, if you look at the actual crime rate in New York from about 1990 to 2005, so the death penalty came back in, I want to say 1994, but during Rudy Giuliani's tenureship, it was on a sharp decline all the way up until 1994. It continued to sharply decline as Rudy Giuliani got into mayorship, and then in 2004 they got rid of it, and it still declined. So the idea that you can somehow attribute this to the death penalty and say the death penalty is the reason why crime goes down, I just don't see that.
No, that makes sense.
Hold on. Rachel was interrupted. I want to hand it back to her. Go ahead.
I'm saying that the death penalty combined with these other factors is extremely effective, and we can see it in other. It would be something if it was just one isolated case. You'd say, I don't know how you could correlate that, but like another really popular example, like I said, post-Revolution France, total chaos, craziness in the streets. They start guillotining people, and suddenly everybody starts behaving better. Vlad the Impaler, started implementing death penalties and putting people's heads on stakes around the town, and everybody stopped stealing and murdering because it's like, oh shit. Same thing with post-World War II Japan. Very, very tough penalties, swift justice, and the death penalty there too. So it has to be under certain circumstances, but yes, it can be for sure a very effective deterrent. It just isn't a good deterrent when you're kind of waffling about on it and it takes 30 years for you to get executed and you get 7 different appeals. Then no, of course it's not going to be a deterrent. So
okay, so I don't even necessarily disagree with some of the examples you put in the end there. So I guess my question to you is two-part. One is, what is the least bad crime that you think should be punishable by death? Because I'm arguing that in the state that we're currently have the death penalty, or at least the way it's kind of argued in the Overton window in America, is for like the most horrible serial murderers, right? So if you're saying we should be more like Singapore and we should start killing drug offenders, I want to hear that, if that is what you think. And then we have to contend with how many innocent people are you okay with if we're going to get rid of all these restrictions dying, insofar as this death penalty is going to reduce the crime rate if we start putting it on these very, 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 not so heinous crimes, nonviolent drug offenders. How many innocents are you okay with dying to make this crime rate lower? Which I do. Again, we've conceded. If you start saying that every crime is punishable by death, crime will go down, obviously, because people are going to be like, I don't want to fucking steal candy. I'm going to die. But the question is, are you okay with that? Killing people who may or may not have stolen candy? And are you okay with killing innocent people who get accused of stealing candy? Like, that's where we then have to have the debate.
Yeah, I get your.
So By innocent, he just means people who may not. So there might be someone who didn't steal a Snickers bar or something like that, but they get death penalty. So I guess I see what he means, but the thing is that we have to, like, Radical Coder brought up the whole 12%, I guess, of innocents, get the death penalty and die because of the death penalty. I don't know how accurate that is. I don't remember if Rachel rebutted that or not. And also 12% out of how many?
Question, and I could answer your question, but it would have absolutely no bearing on my position or my argument whatsoever. So, like, me saying what things I think should be, what we ought punish by death, what the smallest crime should be, has no bearing on whether or not I'm correct about my position and whether I'm correct about the prompt, right? So, I mean, I could tell you what I think, but my personal opinion on the lowest common denominator of what should be punishable by death has no bearing on my argument, and it has no bearing on.
It's more about what are you advocating for?
Okay, well, it's not about advocating for anything. The prompt is it a deterrent for crime? I guess that's where the issue with the prompt comes in, because that's it. It's just, is the death penalty a deterrent? You got to prove that it's not a deterrent. They have to prove that it is a deterrent. That's all Rachel has to do. She's not advocating for anything.
I'm not advocating for anything, so I'm going to debate
Rachel, let me clarify,
I'm going to debate throw you here.
I got you. I got you.
No,
I got you. You learned it from Andrew. I got you. But the problem is that I'm not contending that obviously that the debate is not, hey, if we said that we would kill anyone for any crime, would crime go down? That's like so obvious. It's abhorrent. That's like not what we want to talk about here. What we're talking about is what do we ought to do, or at the very least, what is actually practical. The reason we are against the death penalty is because the practical ways in which the American society is trying to implement it is too costly. It kills innocent people, or 1 in 8 people are exonerated who would otherwise have died for no reason, and it just doesn't seem to deter crime here. So are you advocating then for the death penalty to deter crime in the way that Singapore does, in the way that the Philippines does? I think you were against that one. Like, what are you actually positively enforcing? Because if your only argument is if we killed everyone for any crime, then crime would go down, the answer is obviously yes, and then we can move on to a more interesting conversation.
Well, I didn't make that claim. I didn't say
we are conceding that, just to be clear. Like, obviously,
I made no claim.
I'm not actually.
You're not conceding. Okay, you don't think crime would go down if we killed everyone for every crime? Come on, Ryan.
Well, I think that I think it would go down if we also said that like any crime at all would be responded to with life in prison without parole.
True. I think we could move on to that as well.
Have similar effects, and I think that given the prompt, the obligation would be on Rachel and Marte to make the case that the death penalty specifically would have a higher impact than just life in parole or life without parole.
Fair enough. Yeah,
Again, Ryan's wrong there. The prompt is the death penalty a deterrent for crime? Not is the death penalty versus life in prison, which is the better deterrent or has the same deterrent? The prompt is it a deterrent? That's it. So you could sit there and be like, well, I think if you just gave everyone life in prison for any crime, that's a deterrent too. Well, great. But that's not the prompt. The prompt is the death penalty a deterrent? We're not arguing if the death penalty is moral or if we should implement the death penalty for any and all crime. It's just, is it a deterrent? That's it. Saying that, well, it's the same thing if you just gave everyone life in prison, doesn't really matter.
We're doing the debate thing.
Okay.
Sure. So I did actually make that argument. My argument was that under the correct circumstances, the death penalty is extremely effective as a deterrent. But if you do it under a system like ours, that's very slow moving, nobody takes it very seriously because it's like, I could get the death penalty, but I'll get like 20 years and 7 appeals. So who really, criminals don't care much about that. If justice is swift and certain, yes, they do care. They care a lot about that. And it's not on me to expound on what I think should be punished by death. We could we get into that? Sure. But that would be very stupid of me because that would open me up to all kinds of attacks that I don't need to open myself up to and to actually win the debate.
Bunch of losing
so
points.
It's actually on you guys. It's actually on you guys to prove that the death penalty is not a deterrent. Yes, we took the affirmative, but we don't have to give you any more than just to say, yes, it's effective. And the soy pill already agreed with us. So maybe Ryan can tell me.
Hold on. To be clear, Rachel, I specifically countered your example of Singapore with stats that showed it's not working. And then you said, well, it's multifaceted, but then it is incumbent on you
said it's not working. No, you said that use of drug rates is going up. That has nothing to do with whether the death penalty is an effective deterrent there.
When the death penalty was implemented, the use of drug rates went up and not down.
To
So
clarify,
either it doesn't work.
I believe when she made the claim on the Singapore example, it had to do with drug trafficking, not necessarily drug
Drug
use.
trafficking has increased as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't seen that. Actually, the data I was looking at said it's one of the lowest in the world.
Well, I might have missed lowest in the Rachel, lowest in the world is different from going up from when you implemented the death penalty, which is why you have to prove that the death penalty is a deterrent and not, hey, if we have a lower crime rate here, for example, Japan has very, very rare death penalties and they have very rare crime and they have a very cohesive society that just doesn't commit a crime like in general. So you have to prove the death penalty is the thing that is deterring people and not the fact that it is a society that is already not committing crime.
Okay, so Bill, the thing is that you already conceded, though. You did. You said, well, of course. These are your words. Well, of course, if you just said we're going to kill everybody that... Well, of course, we just kill everybody that commits any kind of crime. Of course, crime's going to go down. You already conceded that. So I don't know why you're going back on that. You conceded that earlier.
And additionally, it seems like every time...
I think that we should clean up the system.
Sorry. Additionally, the other factor that you keep bringing up every time you talk about the effectiveness of the death penalty in these societies is you talk about the swiftness and the certainty, which these, like having swift and certain decisions, this does seem to deter crime, but those don't have to be the death penalty. So again, it's swift and certain punishment is different than capital punishment necessarily. So again, it's on you to make the case that specifically is the thing causing.
You're right about that, but what I'm saying is that of countries that do incorporate capital punishment, if they have a system where the perceived rate of corruption is low and the justice system moves quickly and with what they perceive as certainty, it's extremely effective. We're talking about the countries in the world that have the lowest rates of extremely violent crime, especially murder. Murder is usually the thing you get capital punishment for. And if you look at Japan's another great one. United Arab Emirates, another great one, where people know there that if you get caught, that's it for you. And there's not 7 appeals and there's not 20 years and you can hire a team of lawyers to lawyer your way out of it. It doesn't work that way there. It's extremely effective. How do we know this? Because the rates of the crimes that are punishable by capital punishment in those countries are some of the lowest in the world.
But Rachel, you have to show that's because of the death penalty. Don't you understand that's what you have to prove?
And what you guys have to prove is that it's not. So I can just throw it right back at you. You can try to put me on the defense. So when we can
bring up examples where this clearly gets implemented and
nothing to do with that.
No, can I prove God doesn't exist? Of course not. You have to prove the affirmative case of the death penalty is deterring these people from committing these crimes.
That's actually quite more simple than that. Ryan, I'm going to ask you a question. So if in Qatar, I went ahead and implemented capital punishment for sodomy, right? Do you think there would be more sodomy or less sodomy?
Well, again, I think it's about the swift punishment. So I would say that whether or not you do the death penalty or life in prison for sodomy, I think both of those would have less.
Okay, great. I just had to ask that. So if the KKK was running around the South back then, do you think there would be more blacks or less blacks running around at night?
There's probably going to be less, but
thank you.
Got him.
And I think maybe if I can offer some clarification, I believe it would be Soy and Ryan's job to cut holes into the affirmative position. So it is for Marte and Rachel to defend the stance, and then Soy and Ryan, it is your job to kind of break into that. So
yeah.
Right. So Sarah, that's why I brought up the whole hey, drug rate is increasing in this country. So even when they know for a fact, when I do this drug, if I get caught with this drug, they're gonna fucking kill me. They still do it, and the reason that's not deterring them, even if it was life in prison or you killing them, both of these things are horrible deterrents. They still do it because despite the horrible punishment that will result in it, they still are addicted. They have some sort of sickness, and they people who kill people already know they're fucked after if they get caught. It's not a matter of I'm going to die or not. It's, hey, I'm going to have a horrible comeuppance for this. And the question is, all right, so if you are in a country where you are giving people the death penalty for this crime and it's going up, then clearly it's not working as intended as you're saying, hey, this is a deterrent, this is making people stop. It's just not. So you'd have to show that it was.
But wait a second, because I'm looking at the data and you're misrepresenting it. You're acting as though all crimes are punishable by death. This law was enacted
I'm not saying that.
This law was enacted in Singapore to stop opium trafficking specifically. And in the 4 years after they implemented it, opium trafficking dropped by 66%. There was a 15 to 19% point reduction in the likelihood of traffickers bringing in more than 500 grams of cannabis, suggesting a deterrent effect. And now, even if you say, oh, it's gone up a little bit, the use of drugs there has gone up a little bit. We're talking about
20%,
the crime punishable by death, which is drug trafficking. And again, one of the lowest
I might
in
be
the
wrong
world.
on this, Rachel. Is possession and usage not punishable by death in Singapore?
I don't believe it's usage. It has to be over a certain amount. It targets drug traffickers. We would have to get into like the.
I'll look that up. Ryan, take over me because I could be wrong.
Yeah,
I will concede that might not be the case.
Yeah, I wanted to
the
poke
number
at the
of drug
Japan example.
abusers arrested has halved since the 90s, despite population growth, which the government attributes to its tough policies. So, like,
okay, wait, Rachel, just to be clear, the death penalty is for 15. So I don't know. I'm assuming you don't do drugs, but 500 grams of cannabis. That's half a kilo of cannabis, which is not that much, unfortunately.
That's
although
a lot.
It's
you're selling it.
If you're selling it or you're hoarding it or you're growing it, right? So this is like anyone in this country. Yeah, if you have a gram, it might not just be killing someone who's like smoking a doobie, but this is like we are killing people for 30 grams of coke. Like that's not an insane amount of coke. So okay, I will concede though, this is not just you did a line, you're going to die. However, the drug use is going up, and the drugs are coming from somewhere.
So I have a study here, and
wait, sorry, I was going to bring up the Japan thing before we go into that. Because you mentioned Japan as an example of death penalty, but my understanding is that Japan only very rarely uses death penalty. It's like only 2 to 3 executions a year, and they're done in secret, sometimes years or decades after sentencing. And there's actually no evidence tying Japan's crime decline to executions either.
Well, that's again another situation where in Japan there's another thing is like the social tolerance for this and the stigma. And part of the reason I think the death penalty is so effective in these types of societies is because it puts a massive stigma on this kind of crime. It's like very not tolerated. They don't do what we do here, which is like, oh, he was raised in poor socioeconomic conditions, so he couldn't help it. He just had to kill people. Blah, 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 blah. We just need to rehab them, because rehab rates of violent offenders is extremely low. We've been trying to rehab violent offenders forever in this country. It's been a miserable failure. Everybody knows that. And countries like Japan or Qatar or Oman or the UAE don't fuck around with that shit, right? So socially, there's a massive intolerance, and they're fine with the government prosecuting it. So you probably don't have to kill a lot of people. This is one of the beautiful things about it. If it's a good enough deterrent, you probably don't have to use it that often.
So you think would they not be using capital punishment probably for most violent criminals? If there's only 2 to 3, I assume there's more than 2 to 3 violent murders in Japan per year. But if there's
Japan
only 2 to 3, there must be a very high bar.
The second lowest murder rate of any large populous country in the world. It's extremely stigmatized to do that. Right? Yeah, so I'm saying they probably don't need to.
Wait, I agree with you, Rachel. It is, isn't it more the social stigma though than the do you think the death penalty necessarily is informing the social stigma to that degree, or can you show that that's the case? Because when I was in Japan, the social stigma of cohesion of like, hey, everyone clean up after yourself. Hey, don't do crime. Hey, don't walk around with your shirt off. Hey, don't eat while you're walking. Like this is a very widespread cultural thing, and none of those crimes are punishable by death. And I would assume that, I mean, I can't prove this, but it's pretty obviously logically follows that also infringing on the rights of your fellow man by killing them is pretty frowned upon, not because you're going to die, but because they're just a very cohesive society that wants to treat each other like part of a collective. You'd have to show that this death penalty is the reason why so few people are committing these crimes, which I just don't see this borne out in the data at all.
Well, this is why in my opening statement I'm just going to keep repeating this on a loop.
So again, the prompt isn't like what's a better deterrent for crime or whatnot. You're bringing up Japan, like they have a better social cohesion. Okay, great. Like that could work too as a deterrent. The prompt is death penalty a deterrent? A deterrent, not the only deterrent, not the ultimate deterrent. Is it just a deterrent? So I don't know why they keep bringing up like life in prison or Japan or something. The argument isn't, is death penalty the only form of deterrent? No, no one's arguing that. Is it a deterrent?
I guess it's all a holistic thing, right? A society that takes crime seriously has the death penalty because they're saying, look, This is how serious we are. You do this kind of stuff, off with your head. We're going to hang you from the rafters. That's it for you. It's the chair. It's the
But
gas
it's like
chamber,
Ryan
whatever
said, they
you want
kill
to
like
do.
2 people a year, right? And they still have a lot. They
And
probably have more
saying
violent murders than they do death penalties,
it's
right?
probably the best proof that it's an effective deterrent to have a society where we do institute the death penalty, but we don't have to use it very often because all of you motherfuckers know that you need to stay in line and that this type of behavior is not tolerated. Whereas if you look at more tolerant societies like the United States and Northern Europe, places where the emphasis is on rights rather than duties, and everybody can kind of get away with murder and you can do all kinds of stuff and you're going to get multiple appeals and you're going to get 20 years sitting on death row and getting, your rights are going to be protected. The downside to that, you can say, well, it's because rights, rights.
Rights.
You can say,
right.
I mean,
people should have less of them. Yeah.
Okay, well, we're not going to get into that here, but the argument for it, this is a different, listen, I covered a video covering about rights, a rights debate about if rights actually exist or not. And that's why it didn't feature Rachel, but that's why Rachel's doing this, is because I know Rachel and Andrew and other people are under the belief that rights don't actually exist. They're kind of given to you by the people in power, which it's kind of hard to argue against. I mean, it's kind of true. The reason why we have all these rights is because it's given to us by our government, and the government can take them away when they want. That's why Rachel isn't talking crap about rights. She isn't saying, fuck rights. She's saying that we have rights in that, yeah, wink, wink, we have rights up until the government wants to take them away. That's what she's saying. I know Soy Pill and Radical Coder don't understand that. They really think that, they probably think that we're also born with the default settings of rights, just like that other dude. But no, the reality is they are given to us by the people in charge. That's it.
I'm not saying people should have less of them, but I am saying that rights without responsibilities and duties attached are extremely bad. It's a bad thing to do, to give people only rights and no responsibilities, no duties. And as Soy Pill just said, lack of social cohesion, right? Look at the United States. We have riots every damn summer because some idiot, screws up he gets pulled over and starts acting like a fool and gets shot because he's threatening cops. And we tolerate people burning down all of our cities. Why? That's stupid. You would never have that in these countries. And it's more indicative of the overall attitude of just, we don't tolerate this kind of upheaval and chaos. And so I think that's why I'm making the argument that it's a holistic thing. It's part and parcel. If you have the death penalty as part of a high trust society that doesn't tolerate nonsense and where justice is swift and certain, it's going to be a very effective deterrent. Now, Ryan, do you have anything to counter that claim?
Well, on top of that, to add what Rachel's saying too, and then you have people like the Soy Pill and Radical Coder and all these freaking libtards, all these like other libtards that are about the empathy, and they want to show empathy toward the wrong people. So they'll be like, yeah, well, those people burning down the cities, well, they're just angry about George Floyd. It's understandable. It's the language of the unheard. We must have empathy toward them. Oh yeah, let's show empathy to the people destroying our cities. Yeah, good one. So we have people like that who think it's a good idea to show empathy toward people that are clearly doing wrong. Going back a little bit to what Rachel was saying, she said to have rights without duties, and that's 100%. To have rights without duties is a bad thing, and that's 100% correct.
Well, think about it for 10 seconds. I just want to point it out that we do have riots in Singapore. There was the 2013 Little India riot. This absolutely happens in these countries with these very strict and social cohesion things. And it's not just because we have rights with no responsibilities. It's because sometimes people get very upset with the state of things. And this is just going to happen in lots of societies.
Well,
it's kind of
can you give me the context of that riot? Can you tell me what that was about?
It's not like I didn't just look it up. I totally understood this before. Yeah, there was a fatal accident that occurred at the junction of a race course and Hampshire Road in Little India, Singapore, causing angry mobs of migrant laborers, probably from Malaysia, to attack the bus involved in emergency vehicles, but then had arrived at the situation. 300 migrant laborers were involved in the riot, which lasted for over 2 hours, and 64 people were injured.
Oh, 2 hours! Look at that. They squash a riot there in 2 hours instead of letting it go for months, letting it go for the whole damn summer. And
I want to push back on the summer riots stuff real quick.
everything else.
Because you did say every summer, so we've had very few
question
George Floyd riots since.
right?
Okay, here we go. Radical
I
Coper
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, like,
has
this
to
is a
defend
common
the summer
tactic
riots.
that the right uses to talk about BLM quote unquote riots. What they're actually talking about is the largest civil rights protests in American history, that led to a massive police reforms, and they want to downplay it because they don't want you to protest. They don't want you to go out and protest, police violence, because they know it's effective,
Ryan,
and they
are
want
you
to
really
deter
going to
people
sit
from doing
here and
that.
try to
But
defend
besides
Black
the point,
Lives Matter?
you can go in a minute. But besides that, I wanted to bring up, countries like Norway, who abolished the death penalty in 1979, and they have an extremely low homicide rate. Iceland abolished it almost 100 years ago in 1928, and they have an even lower. It's one of the safest countries in the world.
Wait. Okay,
Denmark.
let's stop there, because you're shotgunning a bunch of shit. Iceland, social cohesion, yes, massive amounts of social cohesion. First of all, a small population,
Agreed.
ethnically homogenous.
Isn't this an argument in our favor, though, Rachel? It's that if you have the
interesting-
social cohesion and no death penalty, it seems to be the very low rate of crime. If anything, this
That
shows
seems to be
that
the causal
it's not a
factor.
deterrent; it's the social cohesion.
The comprehensive social cohesion.
Wait a minute.
Yeah,
Let's go back
holistic.
to my opening. Iceland has a very small population of ethnically homogenous. It's very interesting. You guys could use this in your defense if you wanted to, but I'll crush it for you here. Even though they're mostly secular, they're not a very religious society whatsoever, and they have a lot of egalitarianism. It's very isolated. There's not a bunch of migrants coming in. There's not a bunch of multiculturalism. There's not a bunch of leftism. And again, the emphasis is on duty and social cohesion. Yeah, you probably don't need a death penalty there.
So why don't you argue for that instead of the death penalty? It seems to be working pretty well there.
Well,
right?
I haven't argued for the death penalty. I've just argued that it can be extremely effective in the right conditions. That's my whole. If you guys would ever just absorb my opening statement, my opening statement was,
we understand, Rachel. We're not saying
absolutely can be a deterrent.
The problem is every example that you've brought up has unfortunately been unable to prove that the death penalty is the reason that this is specifically happening. And when you look at these other countries that do not have the death penalty and achieve similar outcomes, it seems to be because of that social cohesion that you said is a good thing and agree with.
So maybe I can ask the question then, if we, because I think it's state to state, right? Currently in America, it depends on the state. But if we maybe enforced federally and overrid everything and said, you know what, for this crime and on, we're going to enforce the death penalty. If you do X, Y, or Z, death penalty, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. If we did that, do you think that would deter future crimes from happening going forward?
Yes, only if we made it so that you don't get 7 appeals, you don't get 2 mistrials, you don't get all these mistrials, you don't get 20 years to sit there, you don't have this slow moving thing where you're going to sit in jail for 3 years before you even go to trial. If it was the situation where we said, okay, these are heinous crimes, you're going to get trial within 6 months, and you're not going to get an appeal unless there's an extreme circumstance, like other countries do. Yes, I definitely think that would work. Can these guys prove that it is not the threat of the death penalty? Can you prove it's not that?
So before we try to do that, do you acknowledge that, under what you just prescribed, there would be an increase in innocent people being killed, and it's already about almost 13%. Do you acknowledge that it would go up under what you just described?
It may go up. I don't know that you could say it absolutely would go up. It may go up.
Well, wait, Rachel, come on. If it's already with the process that you're bemoaning, which is this 25 ridiculous process with all these appeals, don't get me wrong, I think that's ridiculous too. But if we have the death penalty, unfortunately, we have to make absolutely sure that we are killing these people on good grounds. If we get rid of that, and right now it's 1 in 8 people are exonerated, you can't imagine that at least a few more people would not get exonerated if we don't have the process to check whether or not they're being innocent.
Well, look, I don't like the U.S. justice system at all. I think there's a ton of problems with it. I think
that's a pivot, though. Rachel, do you think that more people would die innocently?
What the prompt is whether or not the death penalty is an effective deterrent. And you keep saying, but it could be bad because innocent people could be killed.
Right, because Rachel, if all we're going to do here is just say, look, if you do anything, sorry.
I can't answer your question.
Well, because we're going to go in circles. I'm sorry. I just want to cut to the chase here. Look, like we said, I'm going to keep saying, and look, you could have the deterrent be life in prison prison, or you could have it be death. I think Ryan's argument is that one of those is not very marginally different from the other. But all I'm saying is, if you said every crime was punishable by death, of course people are going to commit less crimes if they think that stealing a candy bar will get them killed. However,
so it's an effective deterrent.
Yes. Effective is the key word there, because effective meaning, oh, crime goes down. Sure. But that's why I need you to positively inform why you want to live in this society where more innocent people are being killed to get this lower rate of crime. Is that worth it to you? Because if you don't want to defend that because you know it's a harder position to defend, I understand. Like, that is a valid debate tactic. But the problem is, if you're saying, hey, the death penalty is a deterrent, I can take that to the logical conclusion. It's like, yeah, we should just kill everyone for every fucking crime. And then is that the world you want to live in, where suddenly we're just killing fucking everyone, and I can accuse you of something and you get very little due process and you die?
Well,
so they're having trouble like understanding the prompt. I'm looking at the prompt right now. The prompt is the death penalty is a deterrent for crime. Rachel and Marte are arguing that, yes, it is a deterrent for crime. It is a deterrent for crime. Radical Coder and Soy Pill over here are saying, have to argue that it is not a deterrent for crime. That's the prompt. That's all Rachel and Marte have to do, is just say, yes, it is a deterrent for crime. Now, Soy Pill does bring up a good point when he says, yeah, but listen, you have to prove that there is a causation there when you have the death penalty implemented. But he keeps bringing up is, what are you saying? Is this the world you want to live in? What are you advocating for? They're not advocating for anything. They're just arguing the prompt, which is the death penalty is a deterrent for crime. That's it. They're not advocating for anything.
We're talking about this. We could talk about less people being killed as well, too, because those people are not killing. So I went ahead and sent a Stanford law review over to Sarah, and what it shows is that a study by Joanna Shepard, based on the data from all states, right, finds that each death sentence deters 4.5 murders, and that execution deters 3 additional murders. Her study also investigates that the contested question whether execution deters crime by passion, murders, everybody else.
Yeah, Marta, can you throw that in the private chat so we can do it too? But
I
said it a little fast. Can you say it again?
So a study by Joanna. Hold on, let me. Or if
I have it in front of me.
I'm gonna send, because it's a picture. I'm gonna send them to you guys directly.
Yeah, it was a PDF, so I couldn't it wouldn't let me send a link. Right.
What's it called again? You said it's a Stanford study.
Yeah. So this is it's a Stanford law review. It's called "Is Capital Punishment Morally Required?" This is kind of like something that's been famously done. I'm going to go ahead and read it off. A study by Joanna Shepard, based on data from all states, finds that each death sentence deters 4.5 murders, and an execution deters 3 additional murders. Her study also investigates the contested question whether execution deters crimes of passion and murders by inmates. So we can also see this as well too. So it does deter by this study as well too. So we can also look at this as a deterrent by this Stanford study. So I think that would also just to go ahead and bounce off of what Rachel was talking about, this not only stops that one person, but would you also agree with me that if I have a worldview and I'm arguing for that in this debate, and I never change your mind, but the 10,000 people watching this debate, it changes their mind, would that be a deterrent? And that's what she's talking about. I think that overall in the premise, what you're arguing for is like, oh, this is one innocent life or that. You're arguing for that. But this person continuously killing in most cases, you could say crimes of passion, things like that, or even people that are rapists. Are they able to be rehabilitated? Would this stop them? Do you want those people to be released in society or kill more in prison? This is something that we have not have an answer for ever since the beginning of this debate. Even in my opening statement, I still don't have an answer for this.
Can I kind of prompt a thought process within that? Because we're saying, is it a deterrent for crime? We already have sentencing and laws out there right now that would presumably deter crime to begin with, even at life in prison, or things of that nature. So if we already have laws in place to deter crime, could we conclude that those are working, or are people still committing crimes and so on and so forth with the chance or hope that they don't get caught or things of that nature.
Well, I would like them to answer Marte's question first, but
Yep.
the thing about that is that a lot of people who are violent criminals don't give a fuck about being in prison. They love prison. They can run their crime networks from prison. Prison is not a deterrent for them. Death might be, because you can't keep doing your crime, and you can't, be a crime boss or whatever from, the beyond. So.
Mm-hmm.
Well, might be doesn't
but I would
feel
like
very
to hear
strong.
them answer Marte's question that he asked at the end there.
I was reading, so I didn't get the exact question.
I don't have an answer for that. So,
but my understanding is this is, or from what I can tell, this is one of the studies that's been critiqued by the National Research Council in regards to this question, and that they've said repeatedly, no study to date has adequately controlled for variables that affect both capital punishment and crime rates, and they don't like that. This is a paper that's been critiqued extensively. Again, at best, there's no conclusive evidence that this is that it deters. And even that paper, I was kind of skimming through the conclusion. It suggests there may be deterrent, and it should be like further investigated. But that's certainly not a causal link. That's kind of a let's do more research, which I'm not opposed to, as definitely still exists.
Ryan,
so you don't have any reputations, what you just said.
Well, hold on. First of all, he did say this is a very questioned as to whether or not the methods of these studies is actually like effectively showing what they're claiming to show. But regardless, like let me cede you this point. If this study showed, like without a doubt, like this was each capital punishment resulted in 3 innocent lives saved, I think obviously that's a good thing. Like, how the fuck do you argue against that? The problem is if it can also show me, because we can talk about, like we said, obviously if you make the harshest punishment for any crime death, it's probably going to reduce at least to some degree. In the same way, when you make abortion illegal, some leftists might argue, people will still get back alley abortions, which is true, but abortion rates do go down. It's going to deter it at least a little bit. By the way, they're not punishing abortion by death there. It's just, hey, we made it a crime. Like, deterrent is the punishment, right? Now the severity, we can argue, is the severity of death so much worse than the severity of life in prison that it's doing this, and it seems like that's not borne out. However, if this is true, let's just say every single time you kill a guy, you're saving 3 to 5 innocent people, and that's an obvious utilitarian argument there. You have to then show that you're not also killing 1 in 8 innocent people every single time, which is why we kept pushing back on that. And you'd have to show that this is not going to cost the state more. Now, if you don't give a shit about the cost, sure, like we're killing the people, we're saving the innocent lives, great. Now, how are we making it so that innocent people don't get killed? Because for every innocent person, 3 innocent people we save by killing 1 in 8 people is going to die innocently, right? And then if you reduce the time, this long drawn out process, now that number is going to go up, just obviously. So that's why we can push it back there.
Just conceded the whole debate, but now we're talking about just semantics of how bad. That's all we're doing, is getting into the weeds of like how bad, is it a deterrent or less of a deterrent? So the whole
that's why he's going, well, what's the least crime that you think we should punish by death? He wants to change the debate because he's already conceded
that's
why, again, I actually didn't read the prompt until I got in here. And if it's literally, can you deter people by saying, I'll kill you, is so fucking obvious that it's a ridiculous premise.
It's not my fault you don't do your homework.
Can I say, I think
go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah. I mean, I think that Soy is getting us closer to a more interesting conversation for sure. But I still think that the life in prison without parole, like you guys, the obligation is always going to fall on you guys to demonstrate that there's a significant difference between crime deterrence of life in prison without parole and the death penalty specifically. That is on you guys to make that case. And you have
right, because the debate could just as easily be, if I take away your fucking cookies for a crime, is it going to make less people do the crime? And the answer is obviously yes too. The question is, should we do the death penalty?
Don't fucking touch my cookies.
Could you fucking kill? If you threaten to kill someone, will at least some portion of the people you're threatening to kill not do the thing because you're threatening to kill them? It's so fucking obvious. It's like,
I'll give you an example. Let's have a Nintendo at home. It's a PS5.
Marte already gave you first of all, Marte already gave you a study that did demonstrate that, and I already gave you worldwide data that when we're talking about the more populous countries and not countries like Monaco that have 300 people in them, the countries that have capital punishment do have the lowest rates of serious crime in the world. And I did contextualize that by saying it's part of a broader system that works, and that the reason it doesn't work everywhere is because if you're not serious about it, it's not a good deterrent, which is another blatantly obvious thing, right? If you have the death penalty, but like nobody really uses it and they give you 20 years and 7 appeals, well, yeah, of course it's not going to be a deterrent. But in places where they're serious about it, it is a very good deterrent. We have provided evidence. What you haven't provided is evidence that to the contrary of that.
Well,
We've
wait,
done
hold on.
nothing
First
but
of all,
provide
we
evidence.
have
Yeah,
by
there's
showing
no
that there are
Reform has
places where there's the
conceded
death
multiple
penalty
times.
there's death penalty for crimes and it doesn't necessarily deter them, like we showed in Singapore with the drug use. And we showed also that there are countries that
You
don't have the death.
that fell flat on its face when we got into it, Soy Pill.
No, we showed
you
if you have
agreed
some
with me.
threshold, yeah, if you are using a very small amount, that's not deterring people, but the drug usage is going up overall. The drugs are coming from somewhere, and these
Because
people should
that's
otherwise
not
be punishable
punishable
by
by
death.
death. What's punishable by death is the
Is
trafficking, and that has
up to
decreased
500 grams of
66%.
weed.
Yeah, that's
Has the drug
trafficking.
trafficking completely decreased?
It's decreased 66% within the first 4 years of them implementing capital punishment for drug trafficking. Yes.
Okay,
and
I do concede that point.
That's
That clearly is a deterrent at that point. Now, look, if you look at these other countries like Iceland, Austria, Ireland, New Zealand, and you look at their violent crime rate, and it says, okay, these people do not have the death penalty in these cases. You have to show that death penalty is at some point the reason why deterrent is working in these other countries with similar or even worse crime indexes. Like,
wait, hold on, that makes no sense. If I don't have a punishment because there's nothing to punish, why would I need the death penalty? So that's like, it's irrelevant. So it's like, what you're talking about is like, so that makes no sense. You're talking about like countries where there's little to no crime. We're not going to have a death penalty. Thus, why have a deterrent if there's nothing to deter? That's basically what you're saying right now. So like, I think
there's some amount of violent crime everywhere, and there's some
and you brought up Singapore and Japan, which already had very low rates of crime.
Murder or anything like that that's substantial that we integrate in China or Singapore. Anything that Rachel's talked about, like that's not been mentioned. So if you don't have this specific thing to deter, why have the thing there? Like that's almost a damn near non sequitur.
Well, no, again, because you bring up countries that already had very low rates of violent crime, and then say the death penalty is the reason for this, right?
Well, no. What she's saying is that what you're saying is that if there's no crime that's punishable by death, right? Why have this there, right? Why have the deterrent there if it's non-existent? This is very simple shit. So all I'm saying is that what you're arguing for is like, let's have this thing. Why isn't it there when the shit isn't even happening to punish?
Right. And that brings us to the more interesting conversation, which is if you do implement the death penalty for these things, if you do does it actually deter the crime? And it's like, again, Rachel, if the conversation is, hey, if I threaten everyone with death, will they not do it? Obviously. And if that's the debate, then I don't understand why you thought that we were going to come in here and say, yeah, every single person, if you point a gun at their head and say, Ryan's saying, and which is a much more interesting conversation, because this is the dichotomy that you guys are kind of forced into, is either you do the death penalty.
That I haven't lost or conceded to yet.
I know that you're not allowed to interrupt your husband at home, so you're trying to get it all here, but please let me finish. Okay, look, so you either have you're saying that it's the death penalty or not the death penalty, right? What Ryan is saying is that there's all these other punishments that we can do that clearly reduce the crime rate. We can look at the crime rates drop from around the world. We looked at your New York example, and we can see, hey, when the death penalty wasn't there, it still plummeted. When the death penalty wasn't there before, it was still going down. So all of these other things are clearly deterrents that clearly work and are clearly effective, and we have a reduced crime rate across the world. So if you're just saying, hey, if I had nothing or the death penalty, would the death penalty work as a deterrent? Obviously, that's such a boring fucking conversation. We're saying, is it worth implementing the fucking death penalty?
Okay, you little prattle machine. Do you want to just concede this debate then and switch to a different debate?
Rachel, I will say this so clearly, and you can clip this. If you're saying, do you want to concede that if you had said, hey, there is no punishment for this crime or we'll kill you, that obviously just saying we'll kill you will make them do it less? Fucking obvious.
I would concede that one too.
We're sticking to the prompt. It's not our fault that you literally said, I didn't see the prompt until I got in here. And when I got in here, I just conceded to the debate. Okay. Then we won the debate.
Can I read something?
We're literally both not even on the same side in this.
Let's pull it back.
Ryan's the only one that brought anything of a fight, and that's not even a fight. Go ahead. Proceed.
So I want to quote something from the paper that Marte brought up. It said, like, this is from the conclusion. It says, if
this is a 2 hour 44-minute debate, and yeah, Soy Pill conceded this a long time ago. Marte put it best that Ryan's the only one that's still like, no, listen, we could still try. Credit to Ryan for at least being like, well, no, I don't concede because of this, but I mean, they lost already. They lost a long time ago.
Recent evidence of deterrence is ultimately shown to be correct. So they're even like hedging their bets. They're like unsure. And again, more recent studies have repeatedly shown there is no conclusive effect. So I think that you're you're not making the strongest case by providing this paper specifically.
You're still dancing around the subject as far as they're saying the pro that's saying it's shown to have a deterrent, and then later on you're going ahead and recanting all that was specifically stated in that article that I sent you. That's what I'm saying, is that you're saying, well, they're hedging their bets. Can you show me they're hedging their bets? How?
Well, they're saying if the recent evidence of deterrence is ultimately shown to be correct. So they're not saying that it is correct. They're saying this recent evidence, and again, more recent studies have demonstrated over and over there is no conclusive evidence. So it seems like this from 2005 or 2006, right? So if more recent studies are saying that, hey, since this paper was published, that that evidence has not held up, and again, like when we talk about the amount of people who are quote unquote saved by the death penalty, it looks at like a national average, which is very, very abstracted and doesn't really tell us the full picture based on a lot of the things that Rachel brought up in the opening, right? That we have to look at more specific stuff. I
heard this diatribe, but you still have no refutation, I hear. So just speculation.
The refutation is that this doesn't demonstrate what you're claiming to.
Oh, so a paper that outright states in the beginning, and then you're saying, well, it's speculative at the end.
Read me what it outright states that you're saying. Counter. Can you read me from the paper what you're specifically claiming it like how it specifically supports your point?
Okay, in the beginning it says it basically states from 1997 to 1999, it shows that each death sentence deters 4.5 murders, and that an execution deters 3 additional murders. Her study also investigates the contested question. When we go down the line of all this other stuff, there's nothing that refutes that.
It sounds like you're reading an article about the paper, not the paper.
This is the paper.
Sometimes there's well, I mean, like an abstract.
They're discussing the paper. I mean, we can talk about all this, but when you open this up, is capital punishment morally required? This is the review. So, I mean, of course, it's a review, but you would have to offer refutation to that initial statement of saying the deter, right? How does it not deter?
Not necessarily.
Right?
I think that if the paper itself doesn't support it, then I definitely don't have to. But which is why I asked you to quote the paper itself. Like I quoted the actual paper. At the very bottom, I was saying how, like, if this evidence does end up being true, which again, it seems like what they're saying is that there's reasonable doubt. Like in the conclusion, the first thing they say is that they outline a lot of the claims that Soy and I have made throughout this, and they say, well, there may be reasonable doubt to this, but they aren't saying that it's been certainly decided that there is a deterrent. So I just don't think this supports you as strongly as you think it does.
Look, we're getting in the weeds. We're getting in the weeds already because they've already conceded. Like they already conceded.
Rachel,
that
I have a very important question to this.
Penalty is a deterrent.
Well, hold on, just me. Ryan hasn't completely, but let me ask you something, Rachel. You have a kid, right?
What?
You have a kid, right? I'm not trying to make this personal, but this is just like a hypothetical. You have a child. Okay.
I'm gonna use the little coders room real quick.
Pick one of them, right? Okay. Say this child walked up to you when they were still a child, right? I know they're all grown now, and they said, "Mommy, I want to go to the movies. Can I have $5? Would you give them $5 to go to the movies?" Or like, "Hey, Mommy, I want to." Maybe it's even more righteous. Can I have $5 to put in the collection plate? Right? Would you give them $5?
Sure.
Okay. Now, if they took one of Andrew's guns and pointed at your head, his .357 Magnum, and say, "Mommy, give me fucking $5 or I'll blow your head off," would they give you $5? Or would you give them $5? Would you give them $5 if they said, "Mommy, I'm going to blow your fucking head off if you don't give me $5?
Well, no, I would just rip the gun out of their hand and
no, they're standing across the room. You're not close enough.
Out of them.
They're about to blow your head off.
I don't know what
this is trying to demonstrate, Rachel.
I'll just concede it. Sure. What's your point?
The point is that there are ways to do this, to deter crime that we're doing across the country because the death penalty is not so common. That is making crime go down. And the death penalty, while definitely obviously going to deter crime if you did it for even the most extreme situations, like we said, like thievery, it doesn't make the argument so interesting as to should we do it? Like I'm asking you to make the positive, like, can we do the death penalty? Not obviously, if the delineation is between nothing and the death penalty, or even like half of a life sentence and the death penalty, that the death penalty is probably going to make people question it a little more. The question is, should we even be having the death penalty? The reason I came in here with my intro and said it's more costly, it's going to get innocent people killed, and it doesn't really seem to deter crime in the places that we've implemented it, is because what's the point of just saying, yeah, okay, people who are scared of death won't do the specific thing if the otherwise punishment is practically nothing? Like, that's why it's not an interesting conversation. Just be like, yeah, hey, obviously my child, if they threaten me with a gun, I'd give them $5.
We've been through this like 5 times, Soy Pill. I understand you don't like the prompt. You want to change it to a different prompt. You want to have a more interesting conversation because you've abandoned the original one. But it's up to Sarah what she wants to do here, because if you've conceded, but Ryan hasn't, right? Like, where do we go here? What
Ryan,
do we do here?
will you double down with me and say
I'm not,
that
listen,
death is
I'm not
I
bad?
have
you
an
what you want.
idea. If we'd like
Well-
to, and Ryan and I will hand it right back to you, but I want to throw an option out for all of you because I do feel like we're kind of coming to a standstill. And my apologies, it was a bad prompt. It was handed to me and I didn't even think twice about it. So
That's
Well,
on
if
you, Kay.
everyone agreed to it, Sarah, that's not your fault.
Yeah.
true. I will still take all of the blame right here. I'm the lady of the panel that has to take the blame. So I will take it. It was on me. I should have thought twice about it. So here's what I want to offer to the 4 of you. And Ryan, you will have your opportunity to add in prior to. But if we would like to, we can shut down this debate. We can close statements, go read a few super chats, and then open the panel. And now we can go into an open dialogue without anybody backtracking on their original statement.
All right. Well, if you want to see the rest of what this happens in the open panel, you could see the. I have a link in the description down below to the original video. Follow Raging Tomatoes channel. They have many great debates on there. Rising channel. But yeah, I mean, like, this was like Soy Pill keeps on like bitching and whining about like, I concede, but should we do the death penalty? And sorry, yeah, Soy Pill, it's not the prompt. The prompt was death penalty is a deterrent for crime, which it is a deterrent. You could argue if it's the best deterrent. You could argue if it's a good deterrent. You could argue if it's a moral deterrent. But unfortunately, that's not the prompt. The prompt is it a deterrent? And yes, without a doubt, it is a deterrent. But what did you guys think about this debate? I thought this was still a good conversation nonetheless. What do you guys think about it, though? Leave a comment in the comment section below. Give this video a like if you liked it. That'll help me out a lot. And if you really liked it, subscribe to my channel. That'll also help me out a lot. I have more great debates like this one. I also have more Rachel Wilson stuff that I think you guys will enjoy. I have more Raging Tomato debates that I think you guys will enjoy. And a whole lot more stuff that I just think you'll enjoy. So just check it out, please. Yeah.